Okay, so for agenda, we're just going to go over a few different things. And the reason we picked these topics is just because we do receive still quite a few questions about it, which is totally okay. So we thought, as opposed to doing like a full overview of CBME, I would just pick a few items that I think may be helpful for folks to hear about. So the first one being how to facilitate Competence Committee reviews using MedSIS. And this will just be an overview of the actual dashboard itself. It's not going to be like how to set up requirements or anything for PAs. After that, we'll do a versioning overview, which includes promoting existing trainees into a stage with new versions, changes to the EPA dashboard for version programs, and promoting new trainees into new versions. So without further ado, we'll just get started with the review dashboard overview. And again, Michelle, as I said, apologize if it's going to be duplicate information for you, but like you said, it's probably good to review it anyway. So first, we'll look at what is the Competence Committee Review Dashboard, who has access to this dashboard, the role of the PA, and I'll also include a demo of navigating the committee review dashboard. And as I mentioned, the demo is an overview of the review dashboard sample that's already been set up administratively. So separate training has been offered to PAs outlining how to set up a review. So the first thing here, what is the Competence Committee dashboard? So, and its intention. So the intention of the dashboard is to streamline Competence Committee processes, help facilitate preparation for committee meetings, centralize all relevant committee meeting documentation, and track meeting dates, outcomes, and decisions. The next step we have here is just access to trainee data. So who in MedSIS has access to the Competence Committee Review Dashboard? And that would be the following groups of people. So the trainee, the program director, the program administrator, the academic coach, and any Competence Committee members. And what is the role of the program administrator? So I did mention this briefly in a few other training sessions, but essentially the role of the PA is to set up the Competence Committee review template. So this is identify the required steps for the review, assign any templated documents to the review, and assign the review template to applicable trainees. Additionally, the PA is responsible to ensure that all completed documentation is uploaded to the dashboard by the user, so that's the trainee, academic coach, file reviewers, etc., prior to the Competence Committee meeting. And just so people are aware that CC review setup is an in-depth process as the functionality is flexible to meet the preference of each individual program. So with that in mind, when I do go over this sample of a review dashboard on MedSIS, you're going to see that it's just set up in a certain way, but every single program is able to set up it in any fashion that works for their review. So they might have one step, they might have 15 steps. It's really entirely flexible. And that's why we offer separate training for PAs to go over how to set this stuff up in advance. Okay, so that is just a brief overview. So the next thing I have on the agenda here is an actual demo of the review dashboard. So I'm just going to exit out of my PowerPoint for a second. And open up MedSIS. So before I start, I just want to check if anybody has any questions before I move forward with the brief demo. Okay. I'll take the silence as a no, which is okay. Feel free to just interrupt at any time as well if you'd like, just because we do have a small group here, or you can utilize the chat and I'll do my best to try to monitor that. But with respect to the demo, so I'm on our training site with my mock trainee, Dexter Morgan here, and the review dashboard, once you go into your learner curriculum and you open up Dexter's profile, the review dashboard is all the way at the end. And for programs that have not set up any of their requirements, which, like I said, I mentioned that we have training available for PAs to show them how to do this in advance, this dashboard tab would be entirely blank. But because I've created a few templates in the past, just to show you this for the demo, you'll see that we have everything set up here. And I'm just going to go over what each individual tab here means. Let me just pull up my notes, bear with me here. Okay. So you'll see in the first top section here in gray is the review, what it's actually called. So for this particular review, it's called a quarterly check. And the period that this is reviewing for this trainee is January to April 2023. And you can see by default, when you go to this review dashboard, that this review is expanded. But if you've done previous reviews, we can expand and collapse this. But if you've done previous reviews, you can see those will show up underneath. And that is the purpose of the review period. That way, it'll be put in chronological order to make it easier for programs to be able to navigate this. So you can look at previous reviews. So if you want to look at this one done in October, December, you can just expand it and you can see all the documentation from previous reviews. You can also see any decisions that were made or any comments and notes. And that's actually helpful because when you're doing your future reviews, you can refer back to this and it may help you make some decisions. And you can also look at previous ones. So some programs, if they've been using this for quite some time, they might have quite a few reviews here. So you can expand and collapse accordingly to keep this nice and clean. And again, you'll see that this review period was July to September. These are the different documents and steps that were used, and any meeting notes on the bottom you can view as well. But just to go back to the present one here. So this is just how the review is set up when it's blank. So the first thing you're going to see here in the sequence number is the order of the steps. And this again is set up by the program administrator prior to the review. So once the PD or anybody else comes in here to do their part of the step, whoever's assigned to it, for example, this will already be ready for them to do that because the PA has set it up. So the sequence number shows the order of the steps. The requirement shows what the actual requirement is. And again, like I said, this is going to be flexible for each individual program. So when you set your program up, you might do it completely different than this. But this particular template is set up that the first step is a learner summary report, and the person responsible for this is the administrator. And then every other step underneath, you can see resident reflection, academic coach report, CC review template, Competence Committee review report, and who is responsible for each of these steps. The next template file column here is if there are any blank templates that the person responsible for the step can download and use, and then upload their own file version of that once it's complete. So for the learner summary report, that would be done in the summary report tab here. And in the way that this is set up, the administrator would just go in. I'm not going to actually pull the report, but just to show you what this looks like. They would fill out this information. They would select whatever fields that they want to include on the report. They would generate it. It would then be able to be downloaded as a PDF. And once they've done that, they would go back to the review dashboard. Again, just bear with me here with this loading. It's usually a little bit slower in our training environment as well. Sorry, guys. There we go. Okay, so this template file, like I said, there isn't one for this step. So once the PA was ready to go and do their step, they would click on the learner summary report title. It would open and you can see the template files. There isn't one to download, but they would just then upload their learner summary report. And I do have a separate window open here, so you can't see what I'm doing, but just bear with me here. So I'm just going to pull the learner summary report. Then they could mark their step as complete and say yes, and then they save it. And now you can see under files that their step is done. They can also set up due date. So we can see, for example, that this January to April review period, the PA has set up the following due dates as a guide to make sure that everything's done in time. So he or she rather will do their step by January 5th, 2023. And now you can see that they've uploaded that the step is complete. There's also a last updated column here that you can keep track of any dates. But again, obviously, these are going to be a little bit off because it's way ahead of the due dates we have here. But just so you know that there is that option to view that. And the same thing if you want to look at the next steps here. So the resident would then come in and they would see that they're responsible for uploading their resident reflection. And the due date that the PA has set is January 7th, 2023. So just a couple days after the learner summary report. So the trainee would then come in, they would open their template file here, which downloads for them. They would complete their information and save it. And once they do that, sorry, I'm just going to close this, but I have one already done. They would come in here and much like how the PA uploaded their step, they would click on resident reflection step. They can see that there was a template file that they could either get from here or clicking directly on the template like I just showed you. And then they're going to put their self-reflection in here, and they can mark that step as complete and save. And now you can see the next step is done. We'll just do the same thing quickly for academic coach. Have an academic coach summary report here. There we go. I know that's a little bit redundant, but I just want to show you how a completed review looks. So then the CC reviewer's turn would come in by January 13th. Ideally, they would click on their step. They would use their blank template that the PA has set up for them. And again, like I said, these are just blank templates that I've used from another program. You may not need blank templates, like your program may not use them. Like I said, it's very flexible and you can set it up in any way that you'd like. You might not even have all of these steps. It is completely customizable for you. But just sorry, bear with me here. I'm just going to put the progress report completed, save. In this case, just an example, just because I didn't click steps complete. So you can see that they mark the steps complete as they click on the requirements and upload their document. But as anybody that has access to this can do this. So it is probably good practice for the Competence Committee member, once they complete their step, to click the step complete yes. But I would actually say the PA should be monitoring this just to make sure that everybody's getting the documentation in on time. So if they notice, for example, that a step isn't complete, they can follow up with that person and just kind of gently remind them to complete their step. And then if there's a case like this where they do see that the template has been completed, but the person just didn't select step or complete, they can open this and do that step for them. So if they save. And then this final step here is typically like, so this would be like the Competence Committee review report that maybe they're actually giving to the resident for their file once decisions have been made. So I'm just going to leave that part left blank, because that typically would be done after the meeting and once the decision's ratified by the RPC. So then they could just come in and upload that step afterwards. Additionally, there's a nice little button here that say this is something that you can add a requirement. I don't know, it may come up where they say, okay, well, maybe this resident's on EEP or something, and it's only that step's only applicable to this particular resident. So instead of making that a sequence requirement in your template itself and assigning that to all residents, you may want to add like one specific resident for this, or one specific step rather, for this particular review on this resident's dashboard. So you can do that as well if you want to add a requirement. So you would have to have set up the requirement previously, but you would just pick whatever the requirement is called. If you had EEP, for example, and again, that would be the PA that's doing that behind the scenes before your actual review. And then who's responsible for that requirement, you could pick that person, any due date is applicable. And then if you want the step to be maybe number 6, you could put a 6 here, any template files that you want, if there is something blank that you want people to use, and then they would come in and do their step and upload their file accordingly. But that's just, this button's handy if you essentially need to add a requirement just for this particular learner for this review. Does that make sense with everybody so far? Okay, perfect. So the last section here, as I mentioned, looking at the other reviews, it's just basically a record tracking. So if you want to make notes during this review, so let's just say looking at these dates, hypothetically, that this meeting was on January, let's see, 24th. And then maybe once you go to the RPC meeting, after you do this review and you put your date decision was ratified, maybe let's just say that was done January 31st. The overall status, these are from the Royal College. So you would just pick at this point that we're going to say this resident is deemed to be progressing as expected. The purpose of this meeting, and there's a couple different options here. Is it an ad hoc meeting? Is it a decision to promote, or is it a regular review? Just say regular review. Outcome of this meeting. There are a few options again. So let's just say continue in the current stage, since it's not a promotion meeting. For the next one here, promotion, not applicable in this case. And then you can put any comments that you'd like. So let's just say progressing as expected, no promotion decision required, whatever you want. You don't even have to use this section. Again, it's just helpful to keep track of any decisions and any comments that are specific to this particular review. And then once you hit save, what will happen is I just have to refresh, so just bear with me here. You'll now see that the current overall status is now progressing as expected because that's what we've selected here. And you can again expand and collapse these if you want to look at previous meetings. Now they're all completed at this point. So that's essentially how this dashboard works. But I do want to make another just point here to just say that hypothetically, if this was, for example, a promotion, so say, I'm not going to save it or anything, but just decision to promote, and you say promotion, and then you're picking promotion to stage 3, like this person you can see up here is in stage 2 foundations discipline. If you were to make this promotion to stage 3, I'll just save it just to show you what I mean. So I'll leave everything else the same. It's not actually changing the stage. This is just, again, strictly for record keeping. So if you want to just keep track of how the meeting went, any decisions that are made, once this person is complete and you've done your Competence Committee report and it's been ratified by your RPC, the PA or whoever's responsible for the step, typically it's the PA, would still need to go to the details tab and change the current stage to core of discipline and the stage details and things like that. That's not done automatically by filling out the review dashboard. The review dashboard, again, I know I've said it a few times, is just to help keep track of the what had happened at the meeting. So I think that's probably it for this overview. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, perfect. So we're just going to switch gears then to the next portion of the workshop. So I'll just minimize that and go back to my PowerPoint. And we're just going to go now over versioning. So I'm not sure with everybody on the call here, some programs probably haven't versioned yet, so this might not be applicable to you at this time, but it is good to know kind of how this works. So typically when your program launches into CBME, which a lot of programs already have, I would get your Royal College documentation and I would upload the requirements as outlined specifically in that Royal College document to make that match exactly how it is defined. But as your program begins transitioning through CBME, what may happen is that the college may decide that, you know, we're going to change a couple of the requirements. It may be minor, it may be fundamental changes, whatever the case is, we're going to implement a new version. So that in my end, I will then receive the new documentation and I will create a new version in MedSIS. So in terms of how that works behind the scenes, I take care of all of that, but I'm just going to go over what all of that means for your program. So in terms of versioning, there has been a recent update to the Royal College versioning process, or policy rather. So the Royal College versioning policy now states that when a trainee is promoted to the next stage of training, they should be registered into the latest version of EPAs available for that stage they're being promoted into, and the latest version of EPAs available for any future stages. So this ensures that the trainees are always using the most current version of the learning path. Previously, how I understand it is that once a trainee was assigned to a learning path, they would complete that version through the entirety of their CBME program. Any new versions that are set in place wouldn't be applicable to them. Only new incoming trainees would use the new version. So this is just a change now saying that that's not how Royal College is going to do it. They want to ensure that trainees are using the most recent version. So as they transition to the next stage, that's when they will begin using the new version. So with respect to how this would impact your program, for programs who have not yet gone through the versioning process, there's no impact, of course. So once your program has a new version of EPAs available, anytime your trainees are promoted to the next stage of training in MedSIS, they will have access to the latest version of EPAs automatically. And for programs who have or are in the process of versioning, there's minimal overall impact, and I'll show you exactly how your program would look once you version. Okay, So first, I'm just going to go over promoting existing trainees. So this is trainees that are currently active in your program that are on maybe version 1, for example, and your program is transitioning to version 2. So effective immediately, when a trainee is promoted to the next stage of training in MedSIS, they'll be registered into the latest version of EPAs available for that stage, as well as any subsequent stages. So this is kind of what I've said a few times so far. For example, if your trainee is currently in version 1, stage 2, so foundations, when they're promoted to stage 3 core, they'll automatically be registered into version 2 of stage 3 core, and then following that, version 2 of stage 4 transition to practice. And again, that's done automatically. So on your end, you don't have to do anything to make that change occur, apart from just actually promoting them in MedSIS, changing that status or changing their stage to core, for example, like I just showed you on that details tab for Dexter. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So with that said, too, I'm just going to show how the EPA dashboard for new versions has changed. So this is in reference to dropped EPA. So as I mentioned, a version may, once your program transitions to CBME and they're doing this for a little bit of time, the Royal College may say, you know, I actually don't think that this particular EPA is helpful or applicable. So we're just going to drop it altogether, just get rid of the entire EPA. Or maybe they're going to keep the EPA, but they're going to make some significant changes to like how it's written or any of the requirements that are needed. So this is just showing how MedSIS, like the actual dashboard itself, would be affected by this change. So when a trainee is promoted into a new version of a stage, what happens to an EPA form previously collected on an EPA that has been dropped or fundamentally changed in the new version? So an archive has been implemented at the bottom of an EPA dashboard. It displays EPAs that have been dropped or fundamentally changed in the new version only when forms were collected on the previous version of the EPA. So if your resident is hasn't collected forms for an EPA that has been dropped, it's not going to have this archive. It's only going to archive forms that have been completed on that particular EPA. Then it was versioned and they got rid of that particular requirement altogether, but we don't want to lose access to those forms. So you'll see here in this example, so stage 4 EPA 1 was dropped in the new version. So you can see that this was the newer one. So EPA 1 OR day has now is the new one, but they used to have EPA 1 after hours coverage part B. That's not applicable in this new version. So they just move all of the, move all of the EPAs from that into a section called an archive. And then you can see that those forms, you can still view them, you can still look at them so you don't lose the actual record, but they're not actually being calculated during any of this progress because this particular EPA is not active anymore in the new version. Does that make sense with everybody? Again, I'll say that this is only going to look like this if your resident has completed any previous or submitted any forms on an EPA that has been dropped or changed. If your resident hasn't done that, then they're not going to have an archive. They're just not going to see that EPA in their list of versions down here. Since this is a new version, they're just not going to see this EPA at all anymore. This will only show up for residents that completed EPAs, and it's just not applicable here anymore. Okay, so next, changes to EPA dashboard for new versions were minor changes. So these are things, like I said, the EPA hasn't dropped. They haven't changed any of the requirements significantly for an EPA. So what happens to EPAs that have been minorly changed in the version, so there's no changes in this case, essentially, EPAs will be displayed on the EPA dashboard in the appropriate sequence order as usual. And then the other inquiry would be what happens to EPA forms previously collected on an EPA that had been minorly changed in the new version. And the answer to that would be where there is a minor change in a milestone or breakdown of requirements for an EPA in the new version, the forms that were previously collected in a previous version will count towards the new set of requirements. So the system will continue to calculate progress on the new version of the EPA using the previously collected forms until all new requirements are met. So just to go back here on the previous screen, this is talking about fundamentally changed or dropped EPAs, but sometimes what will happen is they'll say like, okay, EPA 1 OR day, they may actually just like add a new requirement or something, or like change the way that it was written but there's already been EPAs that have been selected, or forms rather that have been collected towards that particular requirement. The requirement is still applicable in the new version. It's just the language may be a little bit different. So in that case, they would just keep the forms in the in number of forms, for example, would be 4, and they would still keep those as all 4 forms as 5 out of 5 in this case. They wouldn't actually have to archive anything because the forms haven't really changed. There's no significant change to the requirements in the EPA, so they're just going to continue counting them as if it was part of the new version, if that makes sense. And we also have a training guide on our website that I'll show you our website briefly, just so you know where this is, but we have a detailed, sorry, I don't know why my mouse keeps doing that. We have a detailed versioning. How does versioning impact the EPA dashboard? If you want to know more details about this, since this is just a brief summary. Okay. And for promoting new trainees into new versions, so again, these few slides that I showed you are for trainees that are currently active in your program, and they are part of like version 1, for example, but then your program implemented version 2. How does that affect them? So this now, I'm just switching gears a little bit, and it'll be promoting new trainees. So these are ones coming, for example, for July 1st, 2023. They're brand new PGY1s. They have not been part of your CBME program before. So how do you set that up? So as a brief reminder here, current trainees, so those again who are currently active and live in your program will automatically transition to the new version once they're promoted to the next stage of training. This will occur automatically. You do not need to do anything to make this change occur. For new incoming trainees, when PAs are assigning a learning path, programs who have versions will see multiple different learning paths in their drop-down. So just looking at this example here, for obstetrics and gynecology, when the PA would go to set up a learning path for one of their July incoming PGY1s, they're going to see all of their previous versions because they have versioned twice since their initial launch in 2019. So program administrators in this case are instructed to select the learning path the most recent effective date. So in this case, they'll see the one right that I've selected that says obstetrics and gynecology effective December 17th, 2021. So they would just make sure that they select that one when they're setting up their new trainees. And we do have a guide about this as well on our training site labeled how to register a trainee into a learning path that goes over in detail how to do this. And finally, since we went through this quite quickly, since it's only 12:35, so you'll hopefully have some time for lunch after this. It's just, this is a reminder that we do have a CBME training website with multiple different resources. I'm just going to exit out of my slideshow here, and I will put this resource guide in the chat so you guys have it. Okay, and I know that people that have come to our sessions have seen this multiple times, and we just keep promoting it because I feel that it's such a useful tool, especially when you're just transitioning to CBME and you have a lot of questions. On our website, like I said, you'd go to training, you'd go to CBME, but we do have, depending on what other topic you have, if you want PGME specifically, request for time off, those are all here as well. But for the purpose of this discussion, I'm on CBME. And then you can see that there are specific audience or roles in MedSIS. So for program administrators, for example, you would click on your section. There is general information that's applicable to all program administrators for CBME programs. And there's also sections specific to family medicine as well as Royal College. So you'll see all of that here. And as I mentioned in earlier discussion, the guide that how does versioning impact the EPA dashboard, you can see that right at the bottom. Then we have, let's see, administrative checklist, checking up and maintaining my CBME learners is helpful. And this is where you would also be able to see how to set up a trainee's learning path, how to change any stages, how to, for example, how to promote a trainee to a next stage is here, how to close end a trainee's learning path is here. And I just want to see, if you click on this, it has in-depth guides. So you could actually just click on the links and it'll bring you to each of these documents. Sorry, of course, it's going to go slow. So for example, in this one, you'd be able to see how to register a trainee in a learning path. If you clicked on that, it would of course bring you directly to that guide, but I just want to show you where that is So it is under general, how to register a trainee into a learning path. So again, with versioning programs, they would follow the same steps, and they would just make sure that they pick the most up-to-date learning paths, and I have them labeled by date. So for example, that obstetrics and gynecology is effective December 1st, 2021. That would be the one that you'd be picking when you're setting up your new trainees. Okay, so I think that's pretty much all I have. Does anyone have any questions? I know I went through that pretty quickly.
Thank you, Cheyenne.
No problem. Okay, well, it's 12:38, so you guys are more than welcome to enjoy the rest of your lunch, and I do appreciate you attending this session. If you have any questions also, you're more than welcome to check our training website out that I put in the chat, or you can send us a JIRA ticket as well, and I'm happy to help. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.